Okay, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. Hope you had a great weekend. So kicking off the week, very little can be much more important than security. Okay, perhaps the economy, but then even though the economy, security, economy goes hand in hand. But it was cheering news last week, and we spoke about this before, but we want to get as many perspectives as we can on it. The fact that state governments and the federal government would appear to be in agreement on the question, the age-old question of state police, to be or not to be. Well, the indications are that, indeed, the federal government is favorably disposed, as are the state governments. But does that mean we have state police immediately? Let's look at that, and let's look at the impact that state police can have on our situation. Our guest this morning remotely is Dr. Kabir Adamu. He's CEO of Beacon Consulting. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me here once again.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on. And Dr. Tony Ofeyaton in studio, DG International Institute of Professional Security. A fine morning to you both, gentlemen.
Good morning, Uncle Yori, and good morning, Nigerians.
A good morning to you, sir. Now, cheering news. You are among those I can remember. It's not today. It's been years we've been talking about this. But the day has come. Is it Uhuru?
Well, not yet Uhuru. Not yet Uhuru. But I must say I'm excited.
Okay.
I'm excited because that the government is able to understand the necessity of having a state police now. We simply mean that the security architecture of this country is going to be favorably altered. You know,
okay.
Basically bringing security closer to the people, which helps implementation at the end of the day. That is without prejudice to whatever hitch, whatever challenges that may be inherent in the issue of establishing state police. But having said so, it goes beyond just the announcement, because the announcement as it is now is just more or less like assuaging the yearning of the people. But having said so,
it's an agreement in principle.
It's an agreement in principle, yes.
I beg your pardon, sir. I'm going to come right back to you, but let me get Dr. Kabir's, position on this as well. You're also one of those, if I'm not mistaken, even if you haven't said it on a program that I was on, I think I might have watched you or listened to you speaking about it, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Are you, well, Tony said it's not yet Uhuru, but he's excited about the prospect that finally government has nothing negative to say about state police. Why do you think they've come around?
Thank you, Uncle Yori. I mean, the reasons are apparent. Anyone who has taken time to read through the Renewed Hope agenda would have seen that the government was very clear on the fact that it is interested in the decentralization of security. And the creation of a state police is one of the elements of this decentralization. Again, anyone who had the opportunity to read the Presidential Advisory Council report, PAC report, that too was mentioned there. And in fact, they included in that report that one of the objectives of the 9-point priority agenda of this government would include the harmonization of existing police reforms into a single reform agenda, as it were. And in that document, they did speak about the report by former governor of Kaduna State, Governor El-Rufai. You will recall that a few years back, the APC as a party set up a committee chaired by Governor El-Rufai to look into issues affecting the police.
Mm-hmm.
And even though that report was never made public, but the general belief is that that report recommended the decentralization of policing. In fact, former Governor El-Rufai has spoken extensively regarding his stance on the need to create state policing. So it was very clear that the administration, as a matter of principle and policy, was interested in the decentralization.
Okay. Now back to you, Dr. Ofeyaton. You were about to go on to, excited as you are, there still is some more work to be done for life to be breathed into the idea.
Yes, you know, like I said, the legal regime of the creation of state policing had to be addressed. It's not just for Mr. President to say or they express the interest, even if it's part of its political agenda. It must go through the National Assembly. Subsequently, state assemblies would have to buy into that. And of course, you also talk about also the funding. Now you look at the modalities also. Modalities will include a lot of things in terms of procurement, in terms of uniform, in terms of arms and ammunition, in terms of training and all those stuff like that, and in terms of sustenance. Now, these are issues that must come to the table. But I don't have issue with funding as far as I'm concerned. In as much as some argue that it's expensive, I concede to the fact that it's expensive. But if we look at what is happening in the nation today, 2/3 of the states, if not almost all the states, they have one form or the other of paramilitary establishments. You have the Amotekun, you have the Lagos Safety Corps, you have a Kai, you have a Bebeagu, you have Shokoto Masha, you have the Isba, you know, almost all. Recently, the Zamfara state government established the, Forest Protection Guard or something like that, you know. You have all this already in place and they are paying them salaries.
Yes.
The only difference is that they don't bear arms. And that is just going to be the fundamental difference. In terms of training, training is just a matter of timing and upping up and who is conducting the training on behalf of each and every one of them. So for me, because if you look at the strength, the numerical strength of the Nigerian police today, about 500,000 policing 220 million human beings. It's infeasible. Even when you add the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, and the NSCDC together, you know, and you are beginning to talk about 1-point-something million. It's still infeasible. So bringing state police in has a very big complementary advantage. Forget about whether politicians will use them or not. Politicians that know how to use police, whether at federal level or local government, they will still use them. They are using them, if you understand. So the issue is not whether they will use police and the like. It's a police that is greedy that will be used, whether at national level, state level, or the one that will not be used will not be used. Okay. So the issue of using them, to me, is a layman's
it was
excuse.
Overhyped,
yes, yes.
Know, through the
yes.
All the time we've been talking about it. Look, Dr. Adamu, where they already have this decentralization, I suppose the U.S. is one, maybe the U.K. is one. What is your idea about how it would work here? Because there's always been this situation where the Inspector General of Police is in charge of every single last policeman in Nigeria. So I know we are theorizing at the moment, they certainly will work out all these kinks, but how might it flow, looking at where such a system or systems are already in place?
So I would like to start by emphasizing that Nigeria is probably perhaps one of the few federal systems that does not have a decentralized policing arrangement.
Okay.
It is a norm all over the world for federal systems to have decentralized security arrangements. And that means you would have a federal policing system, you would have a state policing system, and then you would have local government policing systems. And in some instances, community policing systems. So as an example, university communities can be allowed to have.
Oh, okay. I think it froze up there, but we see this in some places along the lines of which he has spoken about.
Okay,
okay, your audio has come back now. Please continue.
Excellent. So if we decide to go along this line where we allow the states, the local governments, and eventually some communities to practice some aspect of policing, then we would not be doing anything different from what the standard in the world, as it were. Now, with regards to your question, how would it flow? First off is to determine the jurisdictions of all of these policing functions. So as an example, we could say cyber security issues, terrorism issues, organized crime, and all of that would be the functions of the federal police. But low-level crimes that start from states to local government, that jurisdiction will not be the responsibility for the state and community policing. But of course, there must be synergy between all of the three levels. Even when jurisdictions are clear, there must be some areas where there will be convergence, there will be handshakes, and of course, they will be working towards the same function. And that is why I think what is even more important for us as a country at the moment is to define what we mean by policing, and then to also go back to the Constitution and ask ourselves, what is the mandate of the Nigerian police force? And I say this, a lot of people will be surprised with this statement that I make, but I say it first because I play in the industry and I understand that there is a challenge. We've not separated between policing and then the Nigerian police force. In other words, there are several organizations in Nigeria that are carrying out policing functions, but that are not under the Nigerian police force. Okay. So if we decide to move ahead and decentralize policing, what are we going to do with those organizations? I'll quickly mention some of them. Road safety as an example. In most parts of the world, it is a policing function. To an extent, the civil defense, as it is in Nigeria today, not what it was envisaged to be. It's carrying out policing functions. To an extent, the immigration, because in some countries like Germany, it's the police that carries out immigration rules, most of the immigration rules. So we need to start by defining what we want to achieve in the policing function, and then ask that critical question. The current structure, where some of these organizations are under the Ministry of Interior, others are under the presidency. The anti-corruption bodies that were created out of the police, they're under the presidency. So you have three mandate ministries, as it were, if you allow me to add the ministry, the presidency as a ministry, that have oversight and responsibility for policing functions currently in Nigeria. So first, define what we want to achieve, and then see how we can translate that into state policing. Otherwise, it's going to be a convoluted structure like we have at the moment, but it's going to leave us with that gap where you and I feel under-policed.
Indeed. Now, two things, Dr. Ofoyeto. Many of us have, seen operations in America, for example, even if it is in creative films where police might have been chasing some felons, and as soon as they cross the state line, they have to stop because you hear the jurisdiction doesn't extend into that. But Dr. Adamu was speaking about handshakes and technology and all of that. So, and then, of course, combined with training, I can see how all of that might work, and I'm beginning to get an idea of, indeed how this could work. Look at that particular aspect of it, and also, if you like, tag on, and I'll bring this to Dr. Adamu as well, tag on the whole issue of the judiciary. In other places, like in America, for instance, we have the Supreme Court of one state. We have just one Supreme Court. Some offenses are federal offenses, as Dr. Adamu has pointed out. All of that still needs to be worked out. So there's going to be another sit-down, right? Think tank as to how all of this shall work.
Well, it's not going to be something difficult because as we speak presently, we practice a federal system of government. It will interest you that each state has its own laws, set of laws. And, but even at that, there are offenses that are federal offenses, exactly. Which are also under the Federal Act. It's either the Criminal Act or the Criminal Procedure Code, depending on whichever, whether north or south. Now, the same thing, you have some laws that are domesticated within a state, Lagos state laws, you have Ogun state laws and all those stuff like that. Now, where in most cases you hardly see such conflict, and when there is conflict, the court is in position to give interpretation. But you will see that the schedule of the Constitution has been able to identify which of these roles are to be played by the state government, the local government, and of course the federal government. The same thing is applicable here. Now, at the level of legal drafting, like he rightly said, first thing is to identify, responsibilities and jurisdiction. Once those have been identified, who plays what role? I can assure you, for example, that the issue of arms is going to be strictly, controlled. When you talk about the territorial integrity of the nation called Nigeria, it's going to be under the federal policing system, for example. you know. But when you are talking of things that had to do like maybe stealing, robbery, burglaries, and the like, it's going to be domesticated within the state or the local government.
But there will still be a federal policing presence in every country. In every state.
Yes. Apart from that, there are special forces. There are special forces that will be interstates, that will cut across all states. Like you have the FBI, you have the CIA, and the like. They don't have jurisdiction in America.
Yes.
The M60, MI15, MI16, and so they don't have jurisdiction. The intelligence world don't have jurisdiction. Israeli Mossad and the like. They don't have anything called jurisdiction. You understand? So if the same thing is going to be applicable, it's just a matter of, first, it has been agreed in principle. The others are not going to be something that is going to be rocket science. Okay. Once we have agreed, jurisdiction is something that is not going to be very difficult to be able to identify. Identify the offenses, put them, there are misdemeanor, there are felonies, and of course there are grievous offenses and all those stuff like that. You know well which one to stay. If there are electoral issues, you know electoral issues, if it's not at the national level, it's going to be at the state level. That's what we even still practice as we speak today. So the same thing is going to be applicable to the policing system. Okay. Because the police is only expected to implement, do what? To ensure that peace is applicable in every state based on the law of that state. So what they are doing is more or less like, implementing the law as it were, ensuring that the laws are complied with. That's what they are doing. So it is where they are employed, their jurisdiction, they will implement and ensure that the laws are obeyed there.
Okay. Dr. Adamu, did you want to add to that as a concept, or that's pretty much the way it is?
Okay, yes. I don't want us to leave here without acknowledging a major challenge, and that is democracy at the state level. If there is any challenge, and I've tried to harness the opposition that has been mentioned against the creation of state police, and most of those who are critics who are against it rally around this idea that governors will hijack the process. It's another way of saying that they are not confident that the democratic tenets at the state level is capable of checking the excesses of the governors. Those who say this argue that at the moment, governors are emperors in their states, and that they already have under their control the legislature at the state level, and to an extent the judiciary. And so if you add the instrument of the use of force to that resource that they already have at their disposal, then that means their position as emperors will be solidified, and the civil space, the civic space, will be completely either eroded or muffled to the point where oppositions cannot exist. Now that may be true, but I don't think it should stop us from continuing with this conversation. In other words, and I've spoken extensively with other criminologists, we can come up with a checklist, and that checklist would be like the compliance measure that we can use to say, okay, any state that is able to meet this criteria can be issued a license to proceed. As an example, I can tell you from where I stand that Lagos State is almost advanced, and if that checklist is done transparently, Lagos State would most likely qualify. So Lagos can become a model for the advancement of this conversation. It has in place processes and procedures to a larger extent to limit or check the excesses of what the governor, as an example, would do. But that's not to say that even in Lagos, for instance, we need to advance the democratic tenets. Now, that's number one. Number two is who decides who will be the determinant, for instance, of appointing, if we advance this, the commissioner of police. That's also a very gray area that needs to be critically thought through. It cannot be the governor. It has to be a neutral body that, to a larger extent, is not under the control of the governor. Now, the second argument that has also been advanced against state policing is people would say, for instance, that the federal level is also controlling the police at the moment. But I think those who say this should also appreciate that the checks and balances at the federal level is more advanced than the checks and balances at the state level. Okay. And so if we replicate this and advance it, then it would reduce the challenges that we may encounter if we advance it forward.
An interesting point Dr. Adamu brought up then, the issue of the commissioners of police. I think in other countries, are these offices elective offices where people present themselves to society, or how might it go? Because he was saying that, look, it would be unsatisfactory for the governor to be the appointing authority, and that it should be a neutral body.
I think normally, even in the present formation, you know, if we had done it properly, so to say, it's supposed to even be what I think should be the responsibility of maybe an agency like the Police Service Commission. That's what I believe should have. But in some other climes, it will shock you to know that some other clients, campaigns are done for police chiefs. It's not a strong democratic norm to say that the governor becomes the alpha and the omega in terms of the employment of a police chief. Because if you have the power to hire, you definitely will have the power to fire. Now, but my main concern is not that power to hire, but my main concern is the power to fire. Because the power to fire is the main power. If we have a situation where even if you are a sitting governor for any reason, you want somebody that you can work with, it should be such that the process of removing that person should be more cumbersome and more difficult. To the extent that if that person wants to stand on his value, he would have that assurance that even though, yes, even though you were the person that recommended me, for you to also recommend me for removal should be a tall order. Like the what do you call it, the judges. The governors have some level of input in the appointment of judges. But look at their remover. Their remover is a tall order. A governor cannot come and say, I want this judge to be removed.
No.
It doesn't work like that.
Work.
But the governor has a very high input in terms of the employment of a judge.
Okay. I got to go on a break now. It's an interesting conversation, and we'll see how all of this will work out. But the one thing is that we've been expecting this for a long time. How long do you think would be an acceptable length of time for it to actually come into being? There are people who are saying that, it should have been in existence last week. Last week. So we'll look at that when we come back. Stay with us, please. We'll be right back.
Lagos is the most visited state in Africa as the 5th largest economy on the continent. Covering the state and its government is no mean feat, it's a busy beat. We go beyond the curtain of tapes to traveling far into the deep.
I want to thank the Lagos state government for the healthcare facility.
To bring stories that cut across all spectrums.
A greater Lagos shall be ours.
We tell you stories that define our collective well-being as Lagosians. I'm Adedoja Salamadini. I live in Lagos, inside Lagos.
Okay, welcome back, and we're looking at the subject matter. The federal government and states are in agreement on the concept of a state police. In studio, Dr. Kabir Adamu, he's with us remotely, CEO Beacon Consulting, and in studio in Lagos here, Dr. Tony Ofoyeton, DG of the International Institute of Professional Security. And while we were away, Mr. Usman in Kaduna called in and is holding on. Thank you very much for that, sir. Go right ahead now.
Good morning, Uncle Yori.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you, sir. This this agreement of state policing, if you can check in Kano, Isba, most of them, they are doing it in the favor themselves, because in Kano they bring something Isba. That Isba, they use it to control people that not belong to them. If they want to recruit people in state police, they should check very well and know the proper people that will recruit into the state police. Likewise, see the military issue we are in Nigeria now and some other forces. People that are supposed to be recruited in the work, they will not recruit them. They will recruit different people that are in favor of them. That is what is spoiling the whole things in Nigeria nowadays. So,
but it hasn't, Mr. Usman, it hasn't happened yet. No doubt you are basing what you are saying on some previous experience you might have. You're not even allowing that this could be a fresh page.
Yes, we know that it's a fresh page, Uncle Yori, but the purpose of the state policing, we have been talking of the state policing ever since, but they know what they are doing.
All right.
Except if the federal will look into it for us very well and recruit a proper people into the state policing.
Okay.
They are not hanky-panky people. That is where we can be able. They have state policing in other countries, in US. You will see somebody sit down in the bus stop, but it's a policing watching everything that is going. But it's not in our own Nigeria, in the situation that we are now.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Usman. I appreciate your waiting while we were on break. Now, coming over to you, Dr. Kabir Adamu, a hint of suspicion, lingering suspicion there, which no doubt is going to be based on previous experiences. But I was suggesting that might we not cut the process a bit of slack and say that, look, things might have happened in the past, but state police was not one of the things that we had. Now it's a new day, and it is said that in principle the state and the federal governments are in agreement. But let me go to the question of because of the dire security situation, people think that we should have had the state police since yesterday. But we've been talking about processes now. What to you, to your mind, would be an acceptable interval of time before we have state police up and running and doing their job?
For the simple reason that Nigerians are dying, and anything we need to do to improve or reduce the number of Nigerians dying should be done speedily. And if we agree that this is one element, and I agree that improving policing, mind you, I'm using the word policing, I'm not using the Nigerian police force, is one key area to improve internal security. There is no other area that would improve internal security as much as if we improve policing. And so to that extent, I think speedily. And so that means this conversation that the presidency, the leadership in the executive arm of government, Insecurity, and the governors have started should be given the teeth that it deserves to move it very fast. Now, there are low-hanging fruits that we can quickly and speedily achieve. Uncle Yuri, not too long ago, the immediate past government implemented community policing when it revised the Police Act. And there are two elements of that community policing that we're not having enough discussion about, and that is the recruitment of constabularies and the creation of community policing committees. As far as I know, the Ministry of Police Affairs has perfected this too. In other words, the policy framework for their implementation is 100% completed. As far as I know, even the recruitment and the platforms for the two processes is almost 100% completed. In other words, if you go to all the local governments, 774 of them, and ask for a list of the constabularies, you are likely to find that. Also, if you ask the community policing committees, you are likely to see them in existence, but they are not functioning.
Okay.
Why are they not functioning? The same issue that may stop state policing from functioning. And point I'm trying to make is the political process that is stopping us from achieving improved policing. If we don't take it carefully and remove this initiative from the hands of politicians and place it appropriately within the prism of technocrats and police specialists, then we're likely to fall into the trap that has prevented other police reforms from achieving their objectives.
Okay. Before I come to you, Tony, in studio, Mr. George has called in from Ikeja. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Pierre. Good morning to Dr. Adamu and Dr. Tony, who is gorgeously dressed this morning. I hope he's not planning to marry a second wife.
No, the man has a board meeting this morning.
Okay. Okay, the state police issue is long awaited. I want to appeal to the National Assembly that they should not make this state police exercise part of the constitutional amendment they are planning to do. That one will take a long time. The state of insecurity in the country today calls for urgency in terms of addressing it. If they want to amend the constitution to enable states to create police systems, it's something they can do in isolation. That within a month or so, that law will be in place. The states, many of the states already have some form of policing that they just need to formalize. But I want a situation where the law should make provisions for minimum standard. There should be a minimum standard the state police system should be. If any state that wants to create its own police is not able to meet that system, it has to work hard to come to that standard. Otherwise, you'll be seeing in some states, policemen will be looking like ragtag army, and that is not. And then the law should also encompass the kind of arms they should carry. You cannot establish a state police and you want to send them to the bushes where bandits are carrying RPG without arming the people to go and confront them. Any state that doesn't have the capacity to arm the police shouldn't go into the exercise. These are some suggestions I want the stakeholders to look into.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. George. Okay, on that same question, actually, Dr. Adamu commented on the duration, acceptable duration. George has done so. So bringing the question to you, Tony was saying that, look, it can be done in a month if we want. What are your ideas on how long it should be before they are up and running?
You know, there's what we call the executive bill. Executive bill, incidentally, are the fastest bills in the National Assembly because it comes directly from the presidency. And it is attended to speedily, basically for the purpose of the functionality of the government. Having said so, if we are looking at this from that perspective, that means that we are going to be gaining time. But if we also look at the very fundamental issue Dr. Adamu raised, the issue of politics in security, it happens, unfortunately, to be the major impediment, not just in security, but even in national development. There are regions that want to move, with the speed of light. There are regions that are crawling, and there are regions that are, dragging other regions back or other states back. So it's good that in principle all the state governors have agreed. Now, if they have agreed, I think, if you ask me, that they should allow those that are experts and professionals in this field to do the rest. You have agreed. Let them do the rest. Leave the issue of ethnicity, leave the issue of religion, the issue of politics, leave it out of it. Let this thing be core, pure security issue. With that, we'll be able to gain time. Because if you ask me now what time frame, my own time frame would be as short as maybe 3 months from now. We should hear that all the states in this country have floated their own state security police apparatus and all those stuff like that. Assuming that all of them are ready. It's a point that George made. No, you see, them being ready. At different levels of readiness. Yes, different levels of readiness. But I think that I will also want the federal government to look at the possibility of a takeoff grant for each and every one of the states.
For exclusive use in this project.
Yes, for exclusive use, well monitored by the federal government. If the government wants to really key into that timing, believing it very well, key into that timing, they should be able to have a takeoff grant for all of them.
Okay.
Because if there's no takeoff grant, that excuse will crop up.
It could be a problem. Ada in Jos. Good morning to you, ma'am.
Good morning to your guests. It's Ada calling from Jos State. Yes, both guests, I've been listening to them over time. They've been advocates of state police, and I'm happy now that God has answered our prayers. It's long overdue. But before I go on, I must commend President Tinubu. You know, he's a listening president. Why do I say so? Yeah. At least in the past, our president told us that state police is not an option. He said it. You know, we have a rubber stamp, House of Assembly or whatever. So he really said it. We are not interested in state police again. So I'm happy now that at least President Tinubu did not throw that line of saying that it's not an option. Because this argument of that government will abuse and all that is not here nor there. It means that we are a lawless society. Can't we have stringent measures to put in check those governors? We must be seen to obey the rule of law. We cannot continue like this. Which country? I've Googled this down number. I don't know any country that is practicing fiscal federalism that has only one central police. Until you get the policing system, effective policing system or community policing right to the grassroots local level, because most times they are local. We cannot get it right. That's why we're having the problem we're having. Then they don't have to waste time. You know, just like George mentioned there, you know, let them treat as an isolated case. There are some states that feel that they are not ready, and let them be relying on the federal police now. That's the way to go. Or let's not jump on Nigeria, or it will get better.
Thank you very much, Ada in Jos. Dr. Adamu, coming over to that point, first of all raised by our viewer, George, calling in from Lagos, and commented upon by Tony in studio here. Some states, you know, different levels of development, different levels of preparedness for the state police. Tony's, you know, suggestion is that maybe the way out might be there could be. In fact, I think Tony is not a matter of could be. There should be a sort of a special grant to bring people up to parity in terms of preparedness for the security of their state. Do you agree with that?
No, definitely. I mean, I want to emphasize that this is not going to be a walk in the park. It would require a lot of discussions. It would require coming up with a framework that meets the peculiarities of the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. We have to recognize and agree that there are differences in both the requirements and the readiness of each of the states. And so that framework will have to take that into cognizance. But having said that, other considerations will be what would happen to the current police trust fund, as an example. That fund is being funded by monies, which include some of what should be going to the states. So if they now have responsibility for policing, will that fund be required to operate? How will the structure of the Police Service Commission be? Would it still remain only with jurisdiction or responsibility for the federal police, or would we agree that it can also extend to the newly created state police formations if we decide to go to that rule? So again, it's not going to be walk in the park. There will be a lot of conversations that I don't think politicians are appropriate to lead that conversation, and it takes us back to my earlier recommendation that experts in the field of policing, criminologists, should be brought together to come up with that template. And then after that, politicians can pick it up and go and do what they would usually do, which is to work out the white paper for the implementation. Like I mentioned earlier on, it's part of the priorities for this government, the harmonization of existing police reforms. So maybe it's not reinventing the wheel, it's just the gusto that is required to advance the process forward. And the president has demonstrated that, the governors have demonstrated it. So let's pick it up and move it forward. The National Assembly, too, interestingly, last week, came up with this idea that they will set up a committee. So the pulse of the nation at the moment is desirous of that. And like I said earlier on, Uncle Yuri, what worries me is We release reports every month. 1,022 Nigerians were killed in January. And if creating state police or decentralizing police, because there are two different things, is what will solve that challenge, then for God's sake, let's advance it as quickly as possible.
Okay. Mazi Okorafor, good morning to you, calling in from Arochukwu.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, our guest.
Good morning.
The state police is long overdue. Now, what I advise the government, the state governors, they should try as much as possible, all these vigilante groups, they should get the recruitment from that angle. And there are 3 types of police Nigeria should operate so that we get the needful. Community policing, local government policing, then we talk about the state and talk about the federal government. All of them should be accountable. The state police should be purely on the state issue, but directives within the state, but general overseer against the federal. But the question is this: if the government started that issue of 1,000 employment, they said it, local government, 1,000 people from each local government, all this issue problem could have been solved. But the question is this: we are good in policy making, but implementation is the problem. People will tell you that the governors will hijack it, use it to attack the opposition. Let's keep that one aside. Now, Sayuri and our guest, as a country, we should be trying as much as possible to know the root cause or the root causes of any problem we have, instead of going to the symptoms. You see, after the Civil War, ammunitions were everywhere. Armed robbery came on board. When armed robbery came on board, you saw this one, Aba, Port Harcourt, Calabar, this one is day robbery. You see to Kurukuru, you just say that see people fight, robbing. You don't talk, you talk, you are just a waste that person. Now, that was when the government would have started to fight. But the irony of the whole story that after this issue of armed robbery now moved to the rating, may call it, the UK President, Prime Minister, when he came to Nigeria, you see what we have today is terrorists. Forget about anything, talk about whether bandits are the rest. Look at that with the APC, Stockman was killed over the weekend. Now, we should try as much as possible, in as much as we want to get to state police, all those indices, the local government authority, and like I said, they should have their own drone manned by the local government and manned by the community on their oun. That is it will now help us.
All right.
A situation whereby we sit and say, great people, but all this has to have a referendum. That's the National Assembly or the state government, or whether it is a BJK or a Motoku or anything we call it. That one has to stay. So we have voice. Because when I see a Motoku voice on screen, honestly, at the right job, these are healthy young men that are gallant, that are ready. For them to start the bush is not easy. But I see them, when I see them, I enjoy their job. These are the people that state governors should do what. But in short, I recommend that that is it their GOC or their commander, whatever I may call it, the man is trying. That's the overall boss in the the man is trying. Honestly speaking, these are the type of people state governors should go to their own state and look for. We have.
All right, Mazi. I beg your pardon, Mazi. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mazi. So sorry, but you know we're fast running out of time, and both gentlemen with us, Drs. Ofoyeton and Adamu, have spoken on the need for professionals in the field of policing to be the ones that will take the project home, as it were, as opposed to you know, it being politicians coming together and having their say about it. It was Usman who called in from Kaduna earlier, who was, first of all, a bit apprehensive and was worried about it. So let me start with Dr. Adamu so I can end in studio. That's a point that cannot be overemphasized, isn't it? That this must be a neutral thing. It's every Nigerian is involved, is as involved as wanting the national team to win. At that stage, it doesn't matter. You must be a specialist, right?
No, definitely. Policing, it's a special field. Not all security practitioners are police experts. And so we need to start from there. I mentioned in my contributions earlier on that we need to define what we mean by the policing imperatives of our country. Well, then I want to buttress the point made by Usman. And I'm very happy to note that as part of the Renewed Hope agenda, diversity, equity, and inclusion features prominently there. And so that's what we need to translate even into the policing arrangement that we want to make. We have to ensure that there is diversity. We have to ensure that there is inclusion and that there is equity. The number of women, the number of youths, the way the society is framed, who should be recruited. You can't have a situation where only one tribe or only one, perhaps, gender like that. So diversity, equity, and inclusion should be the way forward.
Indeed.
And I'm hoping.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Really appreciate your presence on the program this morning, CEO, Beacon Consulting. Once more, thank you very much. And Tony.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Sure. To end up in studio, that all-important point, it was even widened a bit by Dr. Adamu there in making comments on the caliber of people and the kind of spread so that this is a national thing, not a thing of sectional interest.
Well, if you are talking about state police,
yes.
That means it's going to be from that state. So the issue of national interest is not coming in. It's going to be state interest.
But it's going to be, but
no, what happened
political considerations should probably be pushed to the back. We're talking about security of life and
it's going to be domesticated in that state.
That's right.
So you are going to be talking about the indigenous of that state with respect to all the ethnic tribes,
must be
all the religions
represented in the conversation.
Must be represented, and they must all be in the equation.
Indeed.
As it were.
That is what I meant. It was my mistake.
But having said so, it's commonsensical. If you want something to succeed,
exactly,
then you have to carry along everybody.
Everybody must be
Security is too sensitive to the extent that if you leave any group, that group becomes your vulnerable point and the threat that will exploit that loophole, and that will now become a problem. So you don't leave any group, and you don't also, put any group at the back.
We hope everybody is listening that because it's an idea a lot of people are excited about, and it must work.
It will work.
Yeah,
I know. You see, on a closing note, I know the president. He's this type of person that once he believes in something, he pushes it through.
Okay.
That's just my belief. That is the hope I have that it will work. Because he believes in it. And he has campaigned with it. And he must make sure that it works.
That's what a lot of people are hinging their hope on. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Tony Ofoyeton, DG, International Institute of Professional Security. That's our program today. We're going to have to leave it here. Join us tomorrow, please, for a fresh edition. I am Yori Folare. Bye-bye for now.